everyone. Seeing as we have a quorum, we're going ahead and get our meeting into order. I am Representative Krajewski, the chair of the commission. Here in person, I'm also joined by Judge King, DA Bible, Attorney Balkovic, all right, Secretary Harry, and then who do we have virtually?
We're joined by Representative Bonner, Professor Rago, Judge Taylor Smith, and Chairman Brown, and also Counsel Mystic.
Okay. All right, great. So seeing that we have a quorum both in person and online, we will move ahead into the public comment period. Ryan, is there anyone waiting for public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we will go ahead with moving forward with the approval of our March 5th business meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? All right. Moved by Judge King, seconded by Attorney Bakovic. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. All right. The minutes are approved. And then with that, I will hand it over to Matt to take us into executive updates.
Great. Thank you. And I'd like to welcome our new member, and I will turn it back to the chair shortly. We're joined by Chairman Brown of the Parole Board today as our new ex officio member. And we're also joined by board member Fox. And with that, I'll turn it to Representative Krajewski for a few words.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Yes, welcome to Chairman Brown. Really looking forward to having you serve on the board. Also wanted to take a moment to just acknowledge and appreciate outgoing Chairman Fox for both his leadership on the Pennsylvania Parole Board, but also as a member of the commission over the last 19 years of his more than 40-year career. Chairman Fox has served on the Pennsylvania Parole Board in various roles, including board member, chief hearing examiner, and chairman. As chairman, his contributions have been very transformative, including leading the development of the Parole Board's decisional instrument in close collaboration with the Sentencing Commission, ensuring that we use validated risk assessment instead of inconsistency and subjectivity. He has continued to create a culture of continuous improvement, which we know matters a lot for us as a commission. It's always evaluating and looking at our guidelines and policies. He has really been a good member of this board. I've been grateful to have some overlap with him, and we wish him the best in all of his future endeavors. And I believe yesterday we also gave him a plaque acknowledging his contributions to the commission. So I'll stop here, see if maybe the outgoing chairman might want to also say any words if he'd like.
Yeah, just I want to again appreciate the chair for your kind words. It's been a pleasure to work with the commission, a pleasure to work with over the years. We part of the strategic committee over the years. So I really got a good sense of what the commission's doing. We just went to an APA conference in all the programs from over the world were there. And the Sentencing Commission, we talked to some people, and they said, well, the Pennsylvania Sentencing Commission is the gold standard of sentencing commissions. And so I thought that was that feedback, that just bring that to you and kind of so that everyone recognizes and understands where we're at. It was really an honor to work with you, and I'll miss working with you on a daily basis. And my friendships, especially with Mark, with Matt, I'll take those with you. The professors, I'll take that with me forever. And so hopefully I'll still be around. And if needed, you can reach out to me. But it was really a pleasure working with you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chairman. Well, and if any of the members want to provide any additional comments, I also, and I believe Chairman Brown is also there with Chairman Fox. Is that correct? So we can also give space to the new chairman to also, if you'd like to provide any, welcoming remarks as well.
Yeah, I just, again, want to say thank you to the commission. Obviously, the working relationship that the parole board has with the sentencing commission is extremely important in the mission that we do. For me, following Jim Fox is a difficult position to be in, but he has given great guidance. He is working through a transition with us. So the parole board's was put in great shape by him, and it's going to continue to move in the direction that he led us in. So happy to be in this role, and obviously the partnership with a lot of the public safety agencies and the Sentencing Commission are extremely important in the success of our agency. So I'm glad we're going to continue to have the collaboration. So I thank you all.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and move on into the next item regarding any other agency updates.
Yeah, so let me just also express my gratitude for Board Member Fox's contributions as chairman and as an ex officio member. It was a great partner to work with and someone who I think advanced the commission's work by his focus on, as the chair said, continuous improvement, but really valuing data and the way that information can improve decision making. And I also would like to welcome Chairman Brown. We had the opportunity to meet and talk about the partnership that the commission has with the board. And I think we're in amazing shape to keep moving forward with the guidelines and our work with them. We've built a tremendous mutual respect and trust between the agencies. So I really appreciate the outgoing chair and welcome Chairman Brown as well. And with that, I'll ask for agency updates, starting with Chairman Brown from the Parole Board.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of continue sort of the discussion that Matt just brought up there in reference to the use of data and risk assessments to ensure that we're making the best decisions at the parole board. We are currently in the process of working with the Department of Corrections and the Sentencing Commission on the validation process for the current or the newly adopted risk assessment that we're going to be using called the Strong R. DOC is in the process of the implementation of transitioning from the LSIR to the Strong R, and along with the process comes a validation requirement for that Strong R. So we're going to continue to partner with the corrections because that risk assessment of the inmates is an important tool that we also use when it comes to decision making. So the validation process is going to continue. We're going to continue to work with the assessment, which is part of that process through a legislative mandate. Ensure that we're using a validated risk assessment. So we'll continue to work with the Department of Corrections, the Sentencing Commission, because that will, again, continue to ensure that we're making the best informed and best decisions that we can when we are making the tough decision of deciding whether to release somebody back into the community. So again, we thank both the Department of Corrections for their work on it and the partnership with the Sentencing Commission as we move this project forward.
Great, thank you. And now I'll turn it to Secretary Harry if she has any comments.
Thank you. And just really to add on to that, in the process of the validation, we only had initially a year's worth of data. I think I heard an echo. You good? A year's worth of data to work around the validation. It came out slightly lower than we wanted, but with any new assessment tool, we look at the weighting and we looked at several assessment items, the weighting of selected questions. When we tweaked that, we saw an improvement in the AUC scores. So we're continuing to move forward with that. The statewide implementation for the Strong R2, which is with those revisions of the different weighted items and assessment questions, will be rolled out in January of 2027. And then we hope by October 2027 to have a full formal validation completed. That way we'll have 3 full years of assessment data that's going to be available for analysis. But again, we will continue to work with Chairman Brown. And just on a side note, welcome and congratulations to Chairman Brown. And of course, appreciate Chairman Fox's relationship and collaboration with the department, and assume we will have the same with Chairman Brown. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for the update. Excuse me, we're going to move on the agenda now to talk about the commission recently hired a new individual. As you know, I'm on page 22, which is our organizational chart. We've retained or maintained 4 vacancies for a very long time for budgetary reasons. And in the space of the information and technology unit, we've been utilizing consultants that we've sought approval for service purchase contracts repeatedly for our work on the CASER application. And so we're fortunate with the last budget to be able to hire a new individual to work with Christy Bundro and her team. So we want to welcome Srikanth Thuma to the team. And so we still have 3 vacancies, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Christy will provide additional details about Srikanth's role and responsibilities during her unit update forthcoming. Okay. I wanted to take another opportunity just to review some of our memorandums of understanding that we have. So on page 23, you'll see a number of MOUs. We have MOUs with different universities that I'll cover, as well as here with the chief clerk of the house for our office space at Irvis. So recently, our Harrisburg office here, the Irvis one, was going to expire August 31st, 2026. And I'm happy that working with the chief clerk, we were able to extend that to August 31st, 2031. So we'll retain our space here at the Irvis building, which is amazing. Recently, we re-upped our lease with Penn State University for our Calder Way office. That was done last year, and that now is through August 31st, 2028. That's a 3-year agreement. So we feel like we have a home now to work in, and we're happy about that. That's been, some stability for us. But I just want to talk about the others with the universities briefly. They'll be coming up in June 30th, 2027. So we have memorandum of understanding with Duquesne University, School of Law, Penn State University, and Villanova University Charles Widger School of Law. So I'll go out of order and just start with Penn State. As you know, our relationship with Penn State is such that all commission staff are not just legislative staff, but we're also Penn State employees, and we work with them to support our human resources, our posting of applications, our finance work that you'll hear later through a service purchase contract, where we process our payments, especially the payments to staff for salaries through Penn State University. And through this MOU, we have an agreement where we receive postdocs, graduate students, interns who support the work of the commission in exchange for, in this case, the previous MOU was $225,000 a year, but it's in kind, meaning we pay the postdocs salary and pay their coverage for that as part of that $225,000. So I had the opportunity with Ryan to meet with the chair of the department and the head of the Penn State Criminal Justice Research Center to talk about the MOU, what they might like to see changed, how they feel it's going. And we both agree it's a great partnership that adds value to both the university and, of course, to the commission. So they're going to provide a strong endorsement when we work with the dean and the university and the provost next year to review our MOU with the university. So I'm hoping it runs smoothly. And I think that one of the real values we saw recently was that the university was willing to not invoice us for salaries during the budget impasse and kind of saved our butt, if you would, during that budgetary impasse. So there's a lot of value added for the commission and a lot of value added that we think provide to Penn State University. So hopefully, I'm not going to be waiting till June of next year to renew that, and we'll work with the dean next year at some point on that. We also have 2 other MOUs, and I'll just highlight them quickly. And part of the value of these is to give us a space for meetings, both on the east side of the state at Villanova and the western part at Duquesne. So as an example, we had a summit several years ago on domestic violence pretrial risk assessment, and we hosted that at Duquesne Law School. And we had academics come from all over the country, practitioners, the folks who developed this tool that we use from Ontario, Canada, as well as folks from the Commonwealth come to that We've also used Villanova on a number of occasions. Most recently, we hosted a visiting delegation of judges and criminal justice practitioners from Kosovo, and we had that at the Villanova Law School. And as part of that, staff teach a course, and I should note also that staff teach 2 courses at Penn State through this MOU. And we also teach a course at the Duquesne University School of Law as part of the MOU. And then through the Villanova University School of Law, we host the Villanova Sentencing Workshop that many of you have participated in, should be familiar, and Ryan could say a few words about that. So I look forward to, and certainly we'll talk to the commission more about this in the coming months, meetings about renewing these MOUs, but I think they're extremely beneficial for the commission and something that I'm hoping that we can extend those university ones for a 5-year partnership extension. So more than anything, wanted to give you an update on the Irvis building. Really happy, and thank the chief clerk here for continuing to give us space to host these meetings, but also to have a home base for us. Okay, so I'm going to transition now, excuse me, to some fiscal matters. The first set relates to fiscal year 25-26 that we're continuing to operate through. So in pages 25 and 26 is our current operating budget for the year. As I noted, we're continuing to operate with 4 vacancies. This operating budget assumes a full complement of staff when we have our operating budget. So it's slightly distorted in that sense when you look at the bottom line, that our operating budget was roughly $3.8 million was our proposed operating budget for 25-26. So through our work and having these vacancies, it is hopeful that actually we will have some cost savings this year. We have reduced the amount of travel that we've done for staff through online platforms.
How are you?
Sorry, a little disturbance. If anyone online, if they could mute if they're not already. So when we come to our bank balances, one of the things that I'll note, and I'll just pivot to that right now, we're on page 27, is our bank balances. We had to burn down a lot of our reserves to meet this budgetary impasse. And then, as I mentioned, we got pretty lucky with the Penn State arrangement, and that was able to save us from spending and exhausting all our reserves. But we're down from $750,000, about 2 months of expenditures for the commission if we didn't have a budget, to now down to $245,000, which is not a lot for us. And so through this cost savings, we're hoping to be able to transfer about $200,000 this year to reserves to try to build that up. And in our budget request for this year, we requested additional fundings to make that backfill to make our reserves whole. We're hopeful this fiscal year that there won't be the budgetary impasse, but I think that the historical precedent now with Penn State set something up to, again, give us a safety valve in case we run out of money, influx of monies. I'll also note 2 other pieces here. We still have a little less than $300,000 in this JRI money that we received over those 4 years. That money's been earmarked, and Christy can talk more about it, and we'll have a service purchase contract to consider related to using it for consultants for the development of the CASER application. So that's been an amazing influx of money that's helped support that development of that application. I'll also note that you could look and see the line for MOU partnership reserves, and that's at $208,000. So over the first 3 years of our work with Penn State University, as I mentioned, we give them $225,000 in-kind services. When there's not enough expenditures, we carry that money over in reserves. So again, we utilize that money for postdocs, grad students, visiting scholars, and so forth. So their enrollment in the program and availability of grad students since COVID has declined. So we haven't received a graduate student in several years. So that buildup of the $200,000 represents that extra money that would have gone to those graduate students. So we're working on ways, of course, to try to spend that, be true to the MOU, but at the end of a 5-year period, those monies carry over to the commission. So they're just in our bank account, kind of held over right now, earmarked as reserves, but we'll transfer them over to our general expenditures or operating budget at the end of the MOU. So I'll leave it at that for last fiscal year. Moving now to pages 28 and 29. As we discussed at the last commission meeting, we receive a financial audit. We fall in a weird space where the legislative branch here does not provide us with an audit, and Penn State does not provide us with an audit. So we utilize an independent financial group to conduct the audits for the commission. We feel this is really important to maintain the integrity of our processes and our fiscal spending. We had moved from working year to year to a 3-year engagement with a financial firm, and that 3-year engagement with Boyer Ritter ended in the previous fiscal year. So we generated an RFP, and we sent out that RFP to 7 different firms, and of course published the RFP in different locations. And we heard responses from 4 different firms. And you could see that the total price ranges from $28,000 to $78,000 for these 3-year fiscal audits. It's the staff recommendation, because the closeness of the bids between SEK and Boyer and Ritter, and the familiarity of Boyer and Ritter, who's conducted the audit since fiscal year 18-19 for the commission, that we seek a motion for the approval of a financial audit contract with Boyer Ritter for fiscal year 25-26 through fiscal year 27-28.
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Chair, can I second? Am I able to second motions?
Second.
Oh, we're seconded by Professor Rego. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion passes.
Great. So now I'm on page 30, and I'm looking at our proposed operating budget. So it's an interesting process to propose an operating budget when we don't know what our appropriation will be for the coming year. But we work through what we believe to be our current expenditures and what our current needs are. And again, this represents a full complement of staff. So we currently have 3 vacancies. So that 2.88 million not only includes a full complement of staff, but we've built in for consideration for the commission a 3% raise for staff as our operating expenditures. As I noted earlier, if you look, we see some efficiencies and reductions in travel. So we've reduced those. And then one of the biggest line items here is about 2/3 of the way down for CASER application development in our operating budget. We're going to be moving from 2 consultants with approval from the commission later to 1 consultant. So rather than being $400,000 for the year, to have $200,000 as we've moved one of the individuals, a little more capacity internal. So our operating budget actually proposed for this fiscal year is going from 3.8 million last year to 3.66 million this year. So I'll ask the chair to seek a motion for approving the fiscal year 2026 or 2027 operating budget of 3.6 million, or ask for any questions or comments before we proceed.
Before we move, are there any questions or comments regarding the budget? I mean, I guess I can say obviously we've been having conversations about some of these budgetary questions over the last couple of years, and it's clear to me that you and the leadership of the commission have been taking seriously how to cut costs where possible while still preserving the mission. So I personally feel very comfortable with us approving this. And unless there's any other comments or questions, do I have a motion to approve the budget?
Yeah, I so move.
moved by Attorney Balkovic and
Senator Street.
seconded by Senator Street. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
And I also want the record to reflect that we've been joined by Senator Street online. Okay, moving down our agenda to our action items related to service purchase contracts. So as I mentioned, the administrative work that we have with, or the relationship with Penn State University, is that we establish a contract with them where they could then invoice us for staff salary and a number of other items. And those extra items are listed on page 33, but essentially a majority of this $3 million service contract is a commitment as a grant through Penn State University for them to invoice us, for us to pay them for staff salaries. So you'll note that there's other things with travel and some other things. So first, any questions, and then a motion for approval of this service purchase contract with Penn State University.
Any questions? Do I have a motion to approve the contract? All right, moved by Judge King,
Second.
seconded by Attorney Bible. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, and so just for the record, that was for the approval of service purchase contract for fiscal year 2026, 27 with the Pennsylvania State University for commission operating expenses of $3,003,213. Okay, moving on to the next service purchase contract. I'm on now page 34, and this is for what I noted earlier, for a service purchase contract with one consultant to continue our work with Carbon Creek in the development of our next generation CASER application. Last commission meeting, we heard from Christy Bundro, the manager of that unit, about the progress and timeline and how that's coming along, and especially the value added of these consultants who continue to work with us. So seeking a motion for the approval of a service purchase contract with Carbon Creek not to exceed $50,000 to provide application development services for the next gen CASER application.
Any questions? Seeing none, for the sake of expediency, I'm going to ask if Judge King and Attorney Bible would be willing to motion and second again for the contract. All those in favor? All opposed? All right, motion passes.
All right, before we get to our real business beyond this service purchase contract, we're going to be discussing an extension of our contract with our council. So I'm going to ask Professor Mystic to sign off for a few moments while, in case any conversation and discussion about his role with the commission, and we will text him and have him rejoin us once we're finished with our discussions.
Let the record show that I've left the meeting at this point.
Thank you, Professor.
Great. As you know, and as I've mentioned at previous meetings, Professor Mystic provides an invaluable service to the commission, not just as legal counsel, but also as sort of a historical counsel on operations, procedures, relationships with Penn State and our partners. And so I'm seeking a motion for us to approval of a service purchase contract with Joseph Sabino Mystic for legal counsel services in the amount of $50,000.
All right. Any questions or comments?
I so move.
Oh, all right.
Second.
Moved by Senator Street, and I think I heard a second by Professor Rago. Is that correct?
Representative Bonner.
Oh, Representative Bonner. Okay.
Yeah.
Apologies for seconded by Representative Bonner. Thank you, Representative. All
You're
those in
welcome.
favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion passes.
All right, we'll bring Professor Mystic back remotely through some magic here. And so before I turn it to Ryan, I just want to give one update that maybe in March, I'm forgetting the dates, we submitted our annual report for 2024 to the General Assembly. And staff made some amendments and updates to our annual report. So we resubmitted that to the General Assembly, posted that on our website. We've updated our dashboards to reflect these amendments, and we have printed copies for all members. So I want to thank the Senate Print Shop for helping and assisting us with producing a really high quality publication. In the past, we had a lot of printed ones. We've gone a much streamlined version because of the ability to have it in a PDF and have that online. And Ryan shortly will be talking about the next annual report. But the nice thing, if you remember, we were in the hole for a little bit and played catch up for probably 3 years to get back on a regular schedule related to our annual reports. And a big thanks to basically all commission staff who have their fingers on this, but Brett Miller's unit and then Bobby's unit, who assists a lot with laying out and working with us on that. And again, the Senate Print Shop. So with that, I'll turn it to Deputy Director.
Thank you, sir. Well, good morning, everyone. Going to spend a few moments here just providing a high-level overview of some projects, and Matt's alluded to a couple of them that staff here at the commission have completed and then will embark upon. But then I will turn it to Bobby Seesock with the Education Outreach Unit to provide more details for his unit update, and then Christy Bundro to provide details for the Information and Technology Unit update. So if you just indulge me for a few minutes, following along with the agenda, I wanted to spend some time talking about the annual reporting and verification process. I know in past meetings I've spent time with much more detail. Just to remind you, this process begins in earnest for staff at the commission in February each year. And it typically takes us through the end of May to complete it. And part of that is the request of data from AOPC, the cleaning of information from the commission's data, also providing counties an opportunity to submit all of their sentences, even though the text of the guidelines says they should all be submitted by the end of January of the following year. We like to work with counties to provide them opportunities to review and verify any of their sentencing information as we make it public, as Matt noted, through annual reports and aggregation, but also through our dashboards on our website, in which it provides judge-specific information. And in the past few years, we've been able to really streamline this process, and that's thanks to the various units that are involved in it. Brett Miller with the research unit, and Bobby and Christy with their respective units, that at the June meeting each year, we're able to present to the commission the reporting percentage, both statewide and by county, for sentences for the previous year. And on page 38 and 39 of your commission notebook, you will find a detailed listing of those percentages. And at the top, you will see the statewide percentage of cases or sentences reported to the commission, and then followed in alphabetical order, each individual county's percentage. And I'm pleased to report that for 2025, the commission received 99% of all sentences. And just as a reference, in 2024, it was 98%. So it wasn't a lot of room to get better, but the Commonwealth and the counties have gotten 1% better in reporting to us, which is great. As you can imagine, when the commission receives 120,000 sentences in a given year, every percent helps us. And I wanted to note, before I get into a little bit of the details there, and I won't say too much because I want to allow Noah and Brett to talk about the research side, but just sort of fundamentally, this process that we do each year lays the foundation for a lot of the research that staff can undertake at the commission, right? This becomes the annual data set for us. And so it's really important that we provide counties the opportunity to reach such high reporting percentages, and that gives the commission all of the granularity and the detail necessary as individuals look to the commission for that type of information. So I just wanted to thank all the units, and if there's any counties out there listening today, thank them for their efforts in reporting sentences to the commission. And just to give you a perspective here, for the 2025 reporting, we had 14 counties with 100% of their sentences, 30 counties at 99%, and 22 counties at 95 to 98%. And there was only one county out of our 67 counties that didn't submit at 95% or higher. And so, I will look to Bobby in the future to make sure that county gets up there with the rest of them. But I don't think that's any of his fault there. So, but this is an important part of it. And, we started publicizing this information back in 2020. And so after this commission meeting, staff next week will make this information available on the commission's website. And in the interim, I will reach out to the individual counties and provide them with their final reporting percentages for the year. So what you want to, yep.
So I just want to say one other thing about this. Obviously, we get a lot of assignments to do research projects and find out what works and sentencing practices. And when you have 99% of the data, you can feel really good about the work. And that data is the backbone of the commission, the lifeblood of the commission, what Bergstrom would call the coin of the realm. So really a big thanks to the counties and also the team for increasing that. And we, as a result, have the most robust sentencing data of any state in the country and probably of any jurisdiction in the world for use by the commission, but also used by our partner agencies and for academics and for policymakers, practitioners, and so forth. So Ryan didn't really note that it used to be way lower not too long ago. And then how do you think, is the missing data random, or is the missing data, and it's not random because it was several jurisdictions leading the lack of data. So how can you draw meaningful conclusions? So we've mitigated that, and we'll hear a little bit later about efforts related to resentencing, which has been a theme of ours as well. So thanks to the team.
Thanks, Matt. Moving on, as part of this process each year was reporting and verification, as Matt and I both mentioned, that sets the stage for staff then to complete the commission's annual report. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I just wanted to share with you our project timeline regarding completion of the 2025 annual report. And as Matt had mentioned earlier, certainly coming out of 2020 and 2021, for various reasons, we fell behind, and we did a double year annual report to address or take into account some of the changes in sentencing reporting relative to COVID and so forth. And we had other projects that took precedent in terms of the 8th edition guidelines and various research and analysis reports for the General Assembly. But I'm happy to say that in the last couple of years, we have really returned to what has been the normal. Typically, the commission or staff provide the commission with the annual report by the end of the calendar year. But it has long been a goal of ours to really try to target the fall as providing the commission with the annual report. And so what you'll see here is a timeline that we're going to strive to complete over the summer, the text of the annual report, as well as the data tables, and compiling a draft report. And hopefully, if we're able to, in September or October of this year, have a final annual report ready for publication. We haven't been able to do that. And in large part, that's just the nature of how much time it takes in requesting data and providing counties those opportunities to submit. If we removed that opportunity for counties to review and verify, we could move this timeline up. But each year we see that that's an integral part in making sure we have full reporting of sentencing information. So stay tuned. We'll update you at the next commission meeting in September on where we are with the 2025 annual report. The final thing that I will talk about briefly here, and then turn to Bobby for the Education and Outreach Unit update. And as Matt had mentioned, the various MOUs with the university, I won't belabor this because he spoke about it. Staff instruct 2 courses at Penn State University. I'm happy to report out that staff have completed the spring semester, and with a little bit more of a focus on the Villanova Law School MOU and the relationship there between the commission, AOPC, and the law school. This year in February and March, the Villanova Law School it just completed its 24th year of the sentencing workshop. And as Matt had noted, several members of the commission currently have participated in that in the past. We may have some members participate in the future. And so we hope for your engagement next year. So next year is pretty remarkable. It's the 25th anniversary of the Villanova Sentencing Workshop. And so that will be a big deal for us next year. And I just wanted to note that Professor Chanenson from the law school there leads the charge in holding all of the sentencing discussions and imparting all wisdom onto the participants, both students and practitioners and professionals. So with that being said, I will turn it to Bobby for the education and outreach update.
Thanks, Ryan. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to highlight a few of the key areas: our ongoing technical assistance and inquiry work, resentencing, reporting outreach, which Matt mentioned, our educational programming, newsletters and video content, and our broader outreach activities for the year so far. To start, a significant portion of the unit's work continues to involve our direct engagement with practitioners, our SGS web users, counties, members of the public. This includes responding to inquiries related to the sentencing and guidelines, as well as technical assistance through the help desk that we have, our review of user role requests, and responding to general correspondence, including correspondence from incarcerated individuals. That work often functions like customer service work, but it actually goes much deeper than that. Each inquiry requires our staff to review existing sentencing policy, statute, and guideline provisions, software functionality, and the release of information requirements. It gives us an important feedback loop as well. We're able to see what users need in forms of support, where clarification may be needed, and where future educational opportunities, reference materials, and policy review may be helpful. We recently held in May our Education and Outreach Committee meeting, the second one of the year. That information can be found in our supplemental notebook starting at page 2. As Matt mentioned earlier, we are one of the 3 vacancies. We have an education and outreach specialist vacancy within our unit. I think next I'll highlight some of the recent resentencing outreach, as Matt had mentioned as well. We began our process in summer 2025 with an outreach to our chief county probation officers in each of the judicial districts to better understand county level resentencing practices and to compare that information with what we were seeing in SGS Web. Through the end of 2025, we held 45 discussions with counties and had 5 follow-up discussions. That work has been very helpful in understanding local practices, identifying workflow challenges, and gathering shared strategies that may assist counties in improving resentencing submissions. Based on information, the 2025 resentencing reporting rate was about 34%, so we do have some room for growth, but that actually reflected an increase from 2024 data of 28%. While there's still significant room for improvement, that increase is encouraging, particularly with several counties that had indicated a willingness to work on their submission through 2025, which we did see that increase. However, many of the counties shared that they are working to improve in 2026 in the reporting of resentences. So we'll hopefully see continued increases, and our repeated outreach with counties will hopefully establish a better working relationship and understanding those activities. As our next step, we're working with Brett in the Research and Data Analysis Unit to review the first quarter of 2026 resentencing data. We anticipate utilizing that data and supporting our continued outreach with counties. So we'll be following up with counties once we have that information to continue that dialogue, and hopefully we'll continue to see an increase in the reporting of those resentences. The annual reporting and verification process that Ryan just highlighted also presents an opportunity for us to think through how resentencing information may be incorporated into existing verification practices, which may help reinforce expectations and support more complete reporting moving forward. On educational programming, our unit fully revised our recurring training calendar for 2026. The goal is to provide a structured and timely set of offerings for practitioners while continuing to offer opportunities for CLE and CJE credits. In 2026, our calendar launched in January and is continuing. To date, we have delivered several seminars to include the basics of sentencing and guidelines, determining prior record score, commission news, OGS overview, sentencing enhancements, sentencing levels and conformity, a legislative lunch and learn session, and annual reporting and verification, and our SGS web walkthrough sessions. In addition to our live programming, we do have a number of e-learning modules on our website to include various topics related to 8th edition sentencing guidelines, such as prior record score. We also have a module related to state parole guidelines and recommitment ranges, and we have several topics related to SGS web updates surrounding the 8th edition guidelines. Turning our attention to the newsletters that we're regularly producing.
May I interrupt you just for a second, Bobby? I'd just like to add a couple of things, and first start by saying, I think the education and outreach offerings by the unit is really impressive and allows us to meet practitioners where they are, and compared to when, we would travel for a 6-hour session in a day. And so it allows individuals, particularly with the 8th edition and all the various guidelines, to access information, whenever they're free. And so I really applaud the education outreach unit and their efforts there. I just wanted to add a couple of things. Sometimes forget to let Bobby know because I'm not in the unit anymore. But Matt and I had the privilege of providing or giving a session at a financial fraud conference in State College last month. And that was the first time that we have engaged in that. They reached out to us to talk about fraud-related cases. And I think as we have been talking about the various data that we have available, it was an opportunity. It was a mixed crowd of individuals, law enforcement, prosecution, bankers, and so forth. But we had an opportunity to talk about generally sentencing in Pennsylvania and the guidelines, which is always important. And then Matt providing real-time information on like what's actually happening in these cases when these individuals are charged with certain theft-related crimes. So we appreciated that, and I think we'll see that as a relationship growing in the future and coming back and being able to provide even more detailed types of presentations. Matt and others participated in a pretrial conference last month in State College. So those are just some examples of other outreach that staff here at the commission are doing, including things, and I might repeat what Bobby said, I apologize, but at the new judge school for AOPC, providing information on sentencing, obviously there. Earlier this week at the District Attorney's Basic Training Academy, I think Bobby talked about the Pennsylvania Parole Board Basic Training Academy. Tomorrow we will be doing a session for the Pennsylvania Bar Institute. And I just want to highlight that our education and outreach is really meant to reach everybody within the criminal justice system. And those are just a few examples of the work of the unit and others at the commission.
Thanks, Ryan. Turning our attention, I just wanted to talk about the newsletters. We release those throughout the year. Typically, we have one that's the month after our commission meeting, which focuses on the general outreach type of activities, many of which Ryan just highlighted. And then we also have, after that, we focus more on educational content, our seminars, and other support materials for practitioners. Some of the topics we've included recently was the release of our compendium, as I mentioned at our last meeting. Our first volume of the compendium was completed related to the sentencing guidelines. We are working on volume 2 and hope to have that done in the near future, which is focusing on resentencing. I'm really excited to have that added to our support materials for practitioners. We also highlighted, as Matt mentioned earlier, our data dashboards and our data snapshots, which I think are really great opportunities to take what can be some complex information, break it down into more digestible content. So we did a release related to that information as well. We did pieces related to our reporting and verification, more as a reminder to our practitioners and our county partners, but also I think it's good for our other consumers to see that information as well. The newsletter, just as some information for you all, has a pretty broad audience. We give that information to judges, prosecutors and defense attorneys, probation staff, court administration, state agencies, legislators, other SGS web users, as well as individuals across the Commonwealth and beyond. I know some of our fellow sentencing commissions are consuming that. So I think it's a really nice opportunity for us to be able to highlight all of the work that we do as a commission and all of the work that's happening here in Pennsylvania. Related to outreach, we also have a YouTube channel, which I talk about, I think, each time. We did publish our March commission meeting, and we're continuing to build that content. But if you're interested, we are now up to 99 subscribers, so pretty exciting. I can't wait to break the 100 mark. We have over 7,500 views on our various content. We're continuing to look in ways to create more video content. One of the areas that I'll be talking about is our work on the Commission on Sentencing Records Exchange, and there's some extensive video work that's going to be associated with that. So our YouTube channel will likely grow in that aspect as well. Related to some of the technical assistance that the unit performs, again, we have our help desk. We have a help desk portal that is our primary way of interacting with individuals across the Commonwealth. We respond to guidelines and guidelines related and policy related questions. From January through April of this year, we had 102 SGS web role user requests and had 537 inquiries through the portal. That support remains our timely and accurate reporting of information and making sure we're able to help our practitioners is a high priority for us. We've continued our work with Christie's Applications and Information Technology Unit, doing some testing related to SGS web deployments. And as I mentioned, we are the users currently testing the Commission on Sentencing Records Exchange. Related to that project, we are working through the educational content, as I mentioned, and how we're going to support counties who, as they look to come on board later this year and next year on that project. I mentioned, Ryan mentioned a bunch of the specific sessions and the sessions that I mentioned as well. Just to give you some context, we've held through the same time frame through April of this year, 25 education and outreach events, reaching approximately 500 users or consumers of our educational live content. So I think a pretty good number. And Ryan mentioned a number of the sessions that we held, so I won't cover those again. We are looking to rejoin the PCCD County Basic Training Academy later this year, so I think that's a great opportunity for us. And all of this information can be found on our website. So with that, I welcome any questions you may have. Otherwise, I'll turn it back to Matt.
Great. Thanks, Bobby, for the update. And I will now turn it to Christy Bundro, who's joining us remotely.
All right. Thank you, Matt, and good morning, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I have a kid graduating high school and we have family arriving today. For the Applications and Information Technology Unit update, I have a few staffing updates to share, as well as a brief update on SGS web support and maintenance activities, but I'll mostly focus on the progress of the Commission on Sentencing Records Exchange application, which we are referring to as CASER for short. Beginning with staffing, as Matt mentioned earlier, I'm pleased to report that the open software engineer position in our unit has been filled. Shrikant Tuma joined the team on May 18th and has already begun supporting application development activities. His responsibilities include implementing new features in our applications, resolving bugs, and assisting with application data integrations and environment management. As Matt mentioned when reviewing the proposed operating budget, one of the two Carbon Creek consultants currently supporting CASER development will transition off the project when the current contract period ends on June 30th. Both of the Carbon Creek consultants have been fantastic to work with. So we're grateful for their contributions that they've made to the project. We also appreciate the Commission's approval of the service purchase contract earlier in the meeting, allowing us to continue our partnership with Carbon Creek. Turning to CASER development, next slide, please, Ryan. The project team continues to make steady progress on the application that will eventually replace SGS Web. Since our meeting in March, our primary focus has been the resentence submission process. I'm happy to report that the development of those core resentence submission functionality features have been completed. This includes the resentence details, resentence sequence, supplemental information, and review and submit resentence pages, as well as the resentencing guidelines form and the resentence submission report. Development of the resentence submission phase was actually completed ahead of schedule, and so the team is going to use the additional time to improve the way data is exchanged between the user interface and the backend system. These changes will make the application more reliable and better positioned to support future enhancements. We've also begun work on the data export integrations we have with JNet services. So these services support data exchanges with partner agencies such as PCCD and DOC and AOPC. So beginning this work ahead of schedule allows us additional time for testing and validation and coordination with our partners. In addition, the team has made several other important improvements to the application. We refactored the interface and some logic related to inchoate offenses and offenses with classifications associated with underlying offenses. We implemented read-only functionality to support users with view-only access. We enhanced some of the error handling to provide clearer guidance to users, and we incorporated feedback from user acceptance testing to improve usability throughout the system. Next slide, please. So at this point, the project remains on track with the revised timeline presented in the December commission meeting. Collaboration with the Education and Outreach Unit has continued to be a key part of our efforts, as Bobby mentioned earlier. We recently completed user acceptance testing for the resentencing guidelines process, and as I just mentioned, feedback from that effort has been incorporated into ongoing development. We'll also be starting user acceptance testing for the resentence submission process in the coming weeks. We're also supporting the development of training materials by the Education and Outreach Unit. To this end, we've configured a dedicated training environment, and we'll be preparing realistic training data that will support hands-on exercises. So this will allow end users in the counties to gain real experience with the application prior to go live. Pilot testing is currently scheduled to begin in late October, early November, more likely, with statewide county rollout planned through 2027. So staff recently collaborated with the Education Outreach Unit and the leadership team to identify counties to participate in the initial pilot phase of the application. Counties were selected based on factors such as county classification, sentencing volume, submission compliance, and organizational structure. Right now, we're in the process of reaching out to the selected counties to gauge their interest in participating in the pilot. And I'm going to give Ryan a chance to add anything since he's the one that's been communicating with them.
Thank you, Christy. I believe we've reached out to 5 to 7 counties. I apologize at the moment. I can't quite remember. In our initial effort, we just were curious to see if the county would be willing, right? And if there was some interest in it, as Christy mentioned, there were some metrics that we were looking at in terms of, who would be best to work with as we progress into this. And I'm happy to say that we have around 3 or 4 of those counties that we've reached out to show interest. We've been able to provide them with a draft timeline and sort of goals of this pilot program. What we do recognize is that you're asking a county and staff within those departments who are already busy to do something in addition. And one of the realizations is while we are hopeful that we could start to pilot this in the late fall, is also not an opportune time to be engaging in the county, considering holidays and other things that come into play, as well as commission availability in terms of staff. So we're looking, and I think we may find some opportunities with counties in that November timeframe. But just, I want to put it on everybody's radar here. It might end up having to be pushed into the new year. But nonetheless, what we can do is we can begin to engage those counties in information. Bobby's unit will have, all sorts of training opportunities. There's a lot of technical things that we want to do up front and before we actually deploy the application for the users to use in generating sentencing guideline forms and submitting sentences to us. And we'll certainly follow up at the next commission meeting when we have, commitments from counties. But I think we're looking pretty good at this point with 4 counties for this pilot, and it'll be really helpful for us. And the final thing that I'll say, and I'll turn it back to you, Christy, this is a really large undertaking in terms of rolling out an application statewide. And, SGS Web has been around a long time. It is, as we've talked about in past meetings, a necessary thing for us to update this. And what Christy and her folks have done is amazing. And I think that once the counties get over the change, it'll be a welcome change in the end. But it's going to take a lot of time and resources, both from a staff perspective at the commission to roll this out statewide, but also we recognize it's going to be a change at the county level too. And so we're building in some flexibility and how we envision working with counties, certainly during this pilot period. So go ahead, Christy.
All right, thanks for that. Okay, just to wrap up my update on the CASER project. So we continue to make steady progress. The recent mission development milestone is done. Pilot planning is underway, and our project remains on schedule at this point. Go ahead and switch to the next slide, please. All right, so while work on CASER does continue, the unit also remains responsible for supporting SGS Web. Staff continue to implement any necessary updates to ensure the application accurately reflects sentencing guidelines and statutes, while also assisting the Education and Outreach Unit with help desk tickets and user support inquiries. And then lastly, just to provide a sense of the volume and importance of the systems we support, as of April 30th, more than 124,000 sentences with 2025 sentencing dates were submitted, and more than 30,000 with 2026 sentencing dates had been submitted through SGS Web. So that concludes my update. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
All right, thank you, Christy. I'm going to have Deputy Director Painter Davis join us now to talk about research and research partnerships, and then Brett Miller will give us an update on the activities of the Research and Data Analysis Unit. And with great anticipation, Ryan will talk about some policy matters that I think are of great discussion here in the Commonwealth. So go ahead.
We partnered with CJRC to conduct a symposium which explored the theory of research practice partnerships and their importance for improving criminal justice outcomes. Part of this symposium, it also discussed the powerful role that sentencing commissions can play in research practice partnerships. This symposium has led to several opportunities, including a fellowship entitled Social Science Research Institute Mid-Career Research Practice Partnerships, which I applied to, and I was awarded by Penn State Social Science Research Institute. The purpose of this fellowship is to enhance the capacity of Penn State and its partners to collaboratively produce and use timely, relevant research evidence. My fellowship will involve developing a research practice partnership model to evaluate criminal justice system practices and to establish a replicable framework for collaborating with criminal justice partners. It's going to largely draw on some of the best practices that have been established by the Sentencing Commission with our research practice partnerships over the years. And the work is intended to strengthen the evidence-based approaches to public safety and health. The fellowship, importantly, will pay for 20% of my salary for work that will also support the Commission's initiatives. This will help offset costs. The symposium lasts year was very successful, and we're following it up this year with another symposium that we're leading in collaboration with CJRC, Criminal Justice Research Center at Penn State. And as last year's symposium was mostly theoretical, this year will feature applied work by highlighting applied work by the Sentencing Commission and many of our partners. Specifically, the symposium will explore changes in the criminal justice system over the past 3 decades, including the rise of interventions to address behavioral health challenges such as substance use, and the need to close gaps between research, policy, and practice. We will explore best practices and collaborations between researchers, practitioners, and policymakers, including how to establish effective feedback loops. This moment is particularly well suited for this symposium as policymakers are seeking more insight into which policies and practices are both efficient and effective, and many justice agencies are lacking the internal capacity to conduct their own rigorous evaluation. So it's important for them to partner with university partners and with entities such as the Sentencing Commission to produce high quality work. There's also a greater push by universities to engage and provide additional value to their communities. So these research practice partnerships are a mechanism by which universities can provide more value not only to agencies in their communities, but also to the citizenry of their communities.
So I just want to say a few words about the symposium also, that Noah and I took the leadership role in drafting the agenda. We think it's really important to have this balance, and the commission is perfectly situated in the fact that we sometimes serve as consultants to the DOC, and other times we work with academics. And so, for example, one of the modules that we crafted will actually focus on evaluation and work on Department of Corrections programs. So Dr. Brett Buckland has been invited. Jordan Hyatt, Professor Jordan Hyatt at Drexel University, who's doing the work on Little Scandinavia, and Professor Derek Krager at Penn State University, who does some of the evaluations on reentry work from the DOC. So we'll have a specific module on that. Representative Krajewski and hopefully some other legislative members will be there as well. So we've had a big part in hopefully the parole board will also be there talking about the work that the commission does in our consultative capacity. So I'm really proud that we are spearheading this initiative and Penn State is paying for it. So that also is good for us in that sense. So
thank you, Matt, for adding that info. I want to finish by talking about some of our other ongoing research partnerships. One is with the Carnegie Mellon Capstone Project. And this past semester, we continued our long tradition of working with Carnegie Mellon on a capstone project. And this particular project involved working with Carnegie Mellon students who are experts in statistics and law students from Duquesne University. And this particular project focused on pretrial decisions and outcomes, with the team developing a predictive model of pretrial recidivism and failure to appear. And we were quite impressed by the product of their work. We traveled to Allegheny to hear about their final report and the utility of the interdisciplinary collaboration between the law students with their substantive legal knowledge and the statistical expertise brought by the CMU students. As a final note, we are currently working on an evaluation and report to Allegheny's probation division to give them some feedback on their probation practices over the past, actually between 2010 and 2020, we're analyzing the practices to give them a feedback report and to start a conversation about what information is most useful to their division to improve their practices. This is just another example of us trying to improve our research practice partnership methods and to take seriously the feedback of our partners and to provide more useful information to them. With that, I welcome any questions. Otherwise, I'll turn it back.
I just have one observation. I want to thank you guys for this work. Our students really enjoy it. And if you need help, Alan Pelton's a good friend at adult probation, and I know they would welcome your views. So thank you all. It's been a great experience, and we'll look forward to continuing it.
Thank you.
Great. And I'll just mention one other thing, and maybe we said it earlier, but this summer we're fortunate to have 3 interns with us. And the diversity of the universities is, I think, a testament to the work we're doing. We have a master's student from Carnegie Mellon who worked with us on this project. We have a master's of public policy student from Penn State University with us, doing their capstone work with us, which will lead to their final paper. And finally, we have an undergraduate from Columbia University in New York working with us also on specific projects. So it's always a pleasure for us to have interns and work with younger folks and introduce them to data and data analysis and public policy, but also all of their hard work, elevates the work that we do as well. So welcome them this summer. So with that, I'll turn it now to Brett Miller to talk more specifically about some of the work of his unit. And I think re-emphasize the theme of the value of this data that we have and all the utility we get from it in our work.
All right, thank you, Matt. Yeah, so I think I want to break up my update today into 2 different parts. So the first part is just sort of a review of the unit's activities over the last quarter since our last meeting. And then the second part, as Matt just mentioned, is maybe a higher level look at sort of the Sentencing Commission as a clearinghouse of data. So that's a phrase that comes right out of our enabling legislation. And internally, we talk a lot about what does that mean. So I'll talk a little bit about our interpretation of that and what that looks like in our work. So last time I was here, I talked about our 2024 annual report and that we were right on the verge of releasing that. As Matt mentioned earlier, we had a slight delay right after the last meeting that set us back about 2 weeks, but ultimately we did end up releasing the 2024 annual report in April. And one element of that I just want to highlight again is that the 24 report is really the first time that we've publicly released any data on the 8th edition sentencing guidelines. So in the report itself, we've got a series of data tables looking for the first time at our new OGS scales, prior record scores, and looking at some of the sentencing results that came out of that first year of implementation. In addition to the report itself, we also have several interactive data dashboards on our website where users can go and they can select 2024, they can select the 8th edition guidelines, and just kind of, at this point, I think it's a good opportunity just to kind of play around with different guideline levels, different OGS and PRS combinations. So just kind of, it's a chance to kind of get a look at where things might be heading and how things got started out, at least in 2024. Then obviously we'll continue to learn more in future years.
I just want to let the record reflect that we've been joined by Commission member Judge Daly has joined us.
Ryan also mentioned that we are already in progress on our next annual report. So we started that process in February. And at this point, we're right in the middle of creating our annual data set, which forms the basis of the next annual report, and then also forms the basis of much of our other work. Over the last couple of years, we've started to publish data snapshot articles on our website. And the idea behind these articles is they're sort of easy to digest, short visual articles. And so our goal is to publish one of these each quarter. We sort of fell behind a little bit last fall where we had several different reports coming due at the same time. But we've gotten back on track and actually released 2 data snapshots over the last quarter. The first one was related to our SR 196 study on veterans in the criminal justice system. And for the snapshot, again, these are digestible. So we focused just on the identification of veterans within criminal justice data. So a short article on that. And then I think the idea is we'll follow that up and we could have several other short data snapshots on our study on veterans. We also released data snapshot 6, which was on the 8th edition sentencing guidelines and what that implementation and that ramp up of 8th edition sentences looked like in 2024 and then going into 2025. just highlighting sort of the slow transition from the 7th edition guidelines to the 8th edition, and how it really took almost a full year to make that transition and start seeing most sentences now being under the 8th edition guidelines. As we've talked about already today, we continue to work closely with the parole board, and just over the last quarter, we produced 2 new reports for the board. One was on parole decisions made in the first quarter of 2026. And for the second year in a row, we also produced individual decision maker annual reports. So each board member and each hearing examiner received a report summarizing all of the independent votes that they made to grant or refuse parole over 2025. So I think, as I mentioned, it's the second year we've produced that report. I think it's been pretty well received by board members and hearing examiners, and it gives kind of a unique insight to see maybe where they feel differently about certain factors than their colleagues on the board or other hearing examiners. I just want to mention briefly one new initiative that we're just kind of on the ground floor kicking off at this point, but it's a project that I'm excited about, and it relates to our dashboards on our website. We're working on putting together a collection of recidivism results from the last 10 years of sentencing data. So my idea for this is that we put together recidivism results based on factors of the sentencing guidelines, and put all of this into an interactive dashboard. And it allows us to look at things like what is the recidivism rate for an OGS 5, PRS 4 for a given sentence type, and how do these individuals do in terms of recidivism, whether they receive probation or county jail or state confinement, and do those results change based on the sentencing alternatives, sentence lengths. So I think this will be a really unique, really interesting dashboard once it's finished. And our goal at this point is to get that up on our website at some point before the end of the year. Hopefully this fall, we'll have that up on our website. But I think it'll be a really unique, interesting opportunity, I think, for the public to view some of these recidivism results. And then finally, my last update from this past quarter, in April, we held a unit retreat, which basically was just our research and data analysis unit, all of us coming together. 2 of our staff members are full-time remote, so they don't work in State College with the rest of us. So it was a good opportunity for all of us to get together in the same room, share each other's work, talk about different projects that some members of the unit might not know as much about, and really just a good opportunity for us to, like I said, be in the same room and talk about some of our bigger picture agenda projects and action items going forward. So I thought it was a successful event, and I hope that it'll be a recurring retreat that we can do maybe on an annual or semi-annual basis. So with that, I think those are my updates just from the past quarter. Like I said, I also want to talk a little bit about the Sentencing Commission as a clearinghouse of data. So in the past at these meetings, sometimes we'll go through our whole laundry list of action items that we get from our enabling legislation. And especially in our unit, we have several very specific assignments that are given to us in these statutes. But one that kind of comes up first, and that we always mention, but we don't necessarily know what it means, is the commission is meant to be a clearinghouse of sentencing data. So Matt and I, like I said, we talk a lot about what exactly does this mean? Are we accomplishing this? And so over the next few slides here, I just want to kind of go through some examples of what this means to us and how we try to make sure that we are meeting this objective. So first, being a clearinghouse of data, to me, first part of it involves the collection of data. So that collection of sentencing data happens through SGS Web every month. Christie's unit in applications and IT sends us over an extract of all of the sentences submitted from the month before. And then the staff in our unit go through a process where we clean up that data. We identify any missing elements of the data. We go into various other sources to fill in those gaps. And then at the end of that process, we have a month's worth of clean sentencing data. Then at the end of every year, we put all those months together and add a few extra variables to all of that. And then we end up with what is our annual report data and then our general release data that we share externally with everyone else. So I think the first part of being a clearinghouse is collecting and storing that data. And the second part is what do we do with it internally? And internally, we use, as Matt said, the data is the backbone of all of the work we do. So we use our own sentencing data for almost every product, every deliverable that we have as a commission. So a big part of that is our annual report, and that probably takes the most staff time of any of these projects. Constantly going on in the background is work either on last year's or next year's annual report. Then that turns into our data dashboards on our website, these articles we publish on the website, the data snapshots, several other reports, things like Senate resolutions, House resolutions that get assigned to us, and then various evaluations of programs and sentencing alternatives that we're constantly working on. And then the last part of being a clearinghouse, I think we have a responsibility to make that data available to the public and to researchers externally. So I'll just go through and give a few examples of these and the ways that we use our data. So we've talked a lot about the annual report today, so I won't spend too much time on this one. But again, just to highlight, this is where we spend a lot of our staff time internally. And the reason we do is we feel it's important and that we do have an obligation to present this information publicly and to really create a record of the sentences each year. And then from the annual report, that kind of happens first sequentially, and then it gives us the data to build everything else off of. So just in the last couple of years, we've started publishing these data dashboards on the website, and it turns out they've been pretty popular. We hear from a lot of people that go to our website just to look at these dashboards and look up information on a given crime type and find sentencing information. And then a lot of times it leads them back to us to want to dig deeper and oftentimes ask us to create a custom report that can dig a little bit deeper than what's shown on the dashboards themselves. But they've been a great entryway, I think, to educating people about our data and what kinds of answers they can find through our data. Again, I mentioned the data snapshots, and one other thing I should say as I go through these examples that I'm really proud of is that I was able to go through all of these different areas and find examples of products that we produced just within the last year. So I tried really hard to find things just from the last year, even just the last few months, that serve as examples of each of these. So the data snapshots, we've produced, I think, 4 of these over the past year, including 3 of them just in the past 4 months or so. This is the most recent one. Again, I mentioned it's about the 8th edition guidelines. And this graphic on the slide is showing kind of that transition from the number of 7th edition sentences in the blue, and then the gradual buildup of 8th edition sentences in the orange bars. We use our data along with a lot of external data from our partner agencies to produce several reports. So just within the past 6 months or so, we've finalized reports for Senate Resolution 196, which was our study on veterans in the criminal justice system. We completed our second evaluation of the short sentence parole program at DOC, and we also completed a report on the revalidation of our own sentence risk assessment instrument. We also use our data, work again a lot with the General Assembly and various committees of the General Assembly to complete impact analyses. So we've actually been doing more and more of these over the past couple of years, but a lot of times these stem from new legislation going up for vote, and members of the Judiciary Committee or Appropriations Committees will reach out to us and say, hey, we have this bill coming up. Could you take a quick look at it and let us know what impact you think it might have? So we've got a few different tools we can use to do that. One of them for major changes, we can use simulation modeling to really take a look at legislation that's creating new offenses and in new areas that didn't previously exist. Simulation models are a good application for that. And then maybe more typically, we get something that is maybe shifting a grade of an offense or tweaking a definition. And then for those, we go back to our own data and we can say there were X number of these cases over the last 3 years, and we think it'll have this impact on state prisons and county jail, et cetera. We often use our data for the assessment of various different policies and practices. So sometimes that's our own internal policies. Last fall, we just completed a validation of our own risk assessment. So the image on the left is a graphic taken from that report. And then, as I mentioned, every quarter we produce a report for the parole board on all of their parole decisions from the previous quarter and how they relate to the guideline recommendations produced by our state parole guidelines. And so the graphic on the right is just a little excerpt from one of those reports. We also use our data to assist in basic academic research. So some of that happens internally. Oftentimes that's through us sharing data or partnering with external researchers. So one example we have here is, this is an example from COVID. This is a little older than some of our other examples, but I do like the graphic here, so I included it for that reason. But it's a really unique time during COVID, and we did some analyses showing the effects to the courts during this time, and obviously the drastic drop in the number of sentences, and then sort of the gradual increase as things open back up.
So, you could see from Brett's description, we have a lot of work just from the mandates and the reports that we're working on. These reports are really fertile ground for academic publications. And so we have limited capacity and bandwidth internally, even though we have devoted folks who are able to work on that. But I'm really proud and we'll reflect these in the notebook next time. We have an article that will be published in Federal Sentencing Reporter, and it's with two of the current postdoc and a former postdoc with me. There's 3 articles under what are called revise and resubmit, which is you submit, you get comments back, finish those up, and they'll be published. And then staff are currently working on 3 others for submissions to academic journals. So part of our mission is not just the clearinghouse and holding this, but it's this dissemination through various things. So to be in a very small operation with Brett's unit of 5 folks and basically maybe have 6 or 7 publications in the next year from our work on veterans to our work on probation and so forth. It's pretty remarkable, and we hope to have a publication drafted too on short sentence parole and the work that DOC is doing and the effectiveness of that program. So,
yeah, and so here we start to get to some of that sharing of the data externally. So one way we do this is through our partnerships with other universities. So Noah just talked about our semester project this past semester with Carnegie Mellon students looking at pretrial risk assessments. So this is actually the second semester in a row focusing on this area. And so we've got 2 separate reports, but it's a great opportunity for us sometimes to learn from those students, but also it's a great chance for students to kind of get real world experience in taking data and turning it into recommendations for public policy. And sort of backing up what Matt was just saying, here, you probably can't read any of this, but on this slide is showing all of the academic articles that have been published based on the commission's data just since 2025. So I think there's over a dozen articles here just in the last year published using the commission's data. And then obviously we do a lot of sharing back and forth with all of our fellow state agencies, including some of our most frequent partners, the Pennsylvania State Police, Administrative Office of Courts, and Department of Corrections. And I should have put the parole board on here too, but constant collaboration and sharing of data between the agencies and really almost every project we do, we're using our own data, but we're also aggregating data from all of these other sources and putting it all together to get the full picture of the criminal justice system. So I think that was it actually. Just to highlight, again, the commission has a data clearinghouse, and Matt mentioned data is the backbone of the work we do. And again, just want to highlight the volume and the breadth of the work that comes from our staff, and just thanks to our staff for all the productivity over the past year. So with that, I'll open it up for questions or comments.
Thank you, Brett. Matt had to step out for a second, so I will pick up. I think he would have turned it to me anyway. This is the final portion of our commission meeting here today. I wanted to spend a few minutes, thank you, Brett, to talk under this policy section about two areas that are obviously of interest here in the Commonwealth. One being Act 44 of 2023, probably more commonly known to people as the probation reform. It's been several years, well, 2 years now since most of it became effective, and so we are starting to learn more and more about Act 44. And the second thing that I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about is Commonwealth v. Lee. This is the recent Supreme Court decision regarding murder 2 and life without the possibility of parole. What you will find in your supplemental materials, in this, I'll jump back now to Act 44. Page 53 to 54 is a summary document of the recent Superior Court opinions. We did have it all. I have it on one page, but you keep adding opinions and it's going to grow to 2 pages here soon. So just to let you know, that's a reference document for you, and also one that we've made available to practitioners to try to just give them a one-stop place to say, go read these and you decide how they should apply. But I'll come back to all that in a moment. What I should have said up front is I have no intention of discussing the details of any of the opinions that are in there or Commonwealth v. Lee. From my perspective and for the purpose of this meeting is through the viewpoint of, are there any impacts on the sentencing or resentencing guidelines, right? A lot of the work we do, as we've heard throughout, education and outreach, is providing this information and helping practitioners figure out how Act 44 works, what are those impacts in terms of sentences and resentences. But for today, I think it's just to say, this is all happening, and a lot of it's happened since the last meeting. Are there any immediate impacts or things the commission should be aware of relative to Act 44 related opinions and Commonwealth v. Lee? So I'll start with Act 44 and say that I think in the series of opinions that have been released since mid-February, it's answering a lot of the questions that we had, like who does Act 44 apply to? How does it apply? When does it apply? And so that's been quite helpful. And I will say from Bobby's unit and from myself, who received the brunt of these phone calls, been very helpful, right? To have something to point to. They were a lot of the questions that we had when the act was enacted back in 2023. And so I think it's nice to be able to point practitioners to something. So with that being said, in terms of its answering questions, I do believe there are some outstanding questions still with Act 44, and I can always turn to the judge here on the commission, but I think there may be some pending cases that will continue to answer outstanding questions for us. In terms of resentencing guidelines, because Act 44 is dealing with revocations of probation, We've had some discussions with some commission members, in passing, and how does this work? One of the things that we've been thinking about is there anything pressing in terms for the commission in terms of the resentencing guidelines relative to Act 44? I've had a lot of time to think about this, and I think from a staff's perspective, I think the simple answer is no. All right. And just as a quick whip background, the commission's resentencing guidelines preceded Act 44 by 3 years. And as Bobby mentioned earlier, you can tell that at least on a reporting side, we're not getting the vast majority of resentences reported to us. As with any of these policy changes, they're incremental. So over time, the policy becomes counties become more aware of it. And I think since resentencing guidelines have been in play and effective, they're being used more and more and more. And of course, Act 44 comes later and creates some limitations on what a court has in terms of discretion that we were historically used to in Pennsylvania. With that being said, I think the limitations from Act 44, as we continue to learn, as the Superior Court releases opinions and just have time to work with it, they're really specific to total confinement. And there's still a lot of discretion for courts to operate in terms of resentences to probation, a resentence to partial confinement. And in terms of its relationship, Act 44, with the resentencing guidelines, there are some areas in which the guidelines conflict with Act 44, right? In terms of what the resentencing guidelines are recommending and what the act will require. But I think the beauty of our guideline system in Pennsylvania is it's advisory and mandatory supersede the guidelines. And so for those limitations on total confinement, specific to a first violation and a second technical violation, yeah, if there's conflict with the guidelines, the statute overrides them, supersedes the guidelines. But once the court hits the third violation, the act no longer has information saying this is what the court should or shouldn't do or can or cannot do. It's back to the way things worked before, where the court has all the options available to them that they had at the time of the original sentence. And this is really important because that's where the resentencing guidelines come into play, right? Now that the court has everything available to them again, in those limited instances in which you're talking about total confinement, now the court again can look at the resentencing guidelines. And of course, it has an interaction when the court's not considering total confinement, they can be looking at the resentencing guidelines for some guidance there. And so I think from our staff perspective, I think the resentencing guidelines are still, relatively in their infancy. I think they're operating. We're going to continue to receive information on those as we see the reporting increase to us. So in terms of that, I'd say I think we're in a pretty good position from the commission standpoint, at least from a staff perspective, to continue to proceed as we have been with the resentencing guidelines. So I'll pause there for a moment. I know our chair is going to have to depart us shortly, I think, and so I want to be cognizant of the time. But is there any questions or comments, or are we all tired of talking about Act 44 enough that we're going to continue to move on?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I had and thank you, Ryan, for the overview. I think I just sort of had a question that is for the practitioners, just as a legislator. I'm not engaging in the sort of day-to-day of the implications around Act 44. And so I'd be curious, however anyone feels willing to share, like what have been, from what I've heard, there's been sort of confusion about, as you said, applicability, but also even confusion in regards to the guidelines that are already set in the 8th edition. And so I'd just be curious about, where do you see the biggest challenges being? Is it just sort of confusion around guidance, applicability? Honestly, just so that I can have feedback to take back to my colleagues the next time they try to, change statute. So it's generally a question for the group, I suppose.
Well, what I see and what I hear from other practitioners and judges, really what it comes down to is frustration by the courts. And I'll give an example. There's one county and a group of judges there that are very hesitant to continue offering special programs to defendants. For example, a drug court program. So based on the recent cases that have been decided, until you take that person into court and there's a judicial finding, it's not considered a technical violation officially. So some of these special programs, for example, a drug court program, they expect these offenders to have minor violations through the program. And they've always made allowances for that. And now when they're finally frustrated and they're ready to go into court with a violation hearing, then they're stuck because that becomes the very first technical violation hearing, and they're limited to 14 days maximum for incarceration. So that's their frustration. Of course, on my end of it as a defense attorney, I'm thinking, this is great. But when you look at the overall scheme of the impact of this, that becomes problematic because, they're talking to me about, well, we just may not open this up to everyone like we did in the past. And again, that may flow to veterans court, mental health, whatever it might be. And so at least for Act 44, that's probably one of the bigger issues that I hear. And the major counties that I practice in, they know that I'm on the commission. So, they pull me aside and we talk about these things. And obviously that makes sense because they want to, follow the law, but they also want to, practically speaking, they want to have a program that provides whatever they can to the folks that are there.
Yeah, so exactly what Mark just touched on is a big issue. The other one is kind of the consecutive nature of which the sentences have to run. So, for example, you may have, and this has come up, and partially it's my office's fault for the way that they handled one of the DUIs, but we had a situation where, a person had a very lengthy electronic monitoring sentence, but that violated prior DUIs that were a state sentence. So theoretically, this individual would finish their electronic monitoring, their probation, and then go to state prison, which again would be years down the road. Not very effective. I mean, ultimately, like Mark and I were talking about earlier, these supervisions, especially when you get to probation, is, meant to, hey, you've already dealt with sort of these issues, and now we're kind of just keeping you on track, to do that kind of opposite, where you kind of hopefully get them back on track, and maybe years down the road, they're working now, they're taking care of their family, they're, really righted the ship, and now they're expected to then go to state prison, from a mistake from years ago. So, that's kind of the way it's written. I mean, I've talked to Ryan about it. That's all of our understanding on how it's supposedly implemented, but it really doesn't make sense practically to do it that way.
So I think we're talking about two different things at the moment. One is Act 44, and then also Deanna's law with the DUIs. So I think I just wanted to clarify that the DA is specifically talking about Deanna's law, not Act 44. But those are some of the issues that you hear. I mean, even with the confluence of Deanna's law overlaying with Act 44. But I think it's a good discussion, and maybe one that would be beneficial to us to have. We could have a subcommittee to talk about it. I think you opened up a question that you would probably have to field answers to for the next hour, Chair. So with time in mind, one thing I would summarize just to say is, and I'm not speaking in terms of what was the intent of the law and so forth. I think what we're talking about, or what we're seeing from a staff perspective, is the real world application of this. And from a practical standpoint, yes, there's been some changes, but there's also been some things that seem to be a little inconsistent with the way in which probation and revocations have been practiced in Pennsylvania historically. Not that that would be wrong, but I think there's areas in which, as Superior Court has continued to highlight, that there was some, it was unclear, which created inconsistencies across the state. And you're seeing, as Attorney Bolkovac mentioned, where probation departments would work with somebody in the community for maybe 6, 9 months and, end up by the time they come in front of the judge, they might have 12 or 15 violations and it's the first time they're there, but the court's considering all of those violations. That's working with somebody in the community. Now, in order for the court to have options available to them, they're going to have to bring them in for each individual violation. And that's part of the treatment court, some conflicts with treatment court modalities and so forth. But happy to talk a little bit more offline. I certainly don't want to shut down the conversation for any other members, but I know we're on a little bit of a time limit here. Judge Dally?
Yeah. If I could just say something. I'm chair of the legislative committee for the trial conference, and we are convening a subcommittee of judges that do a lot of criminal work to look at Act 44 and make suggestions to the legislature as to the way it could be tweaked to make it more workable. And we're just starting that process. We have our first meeting next week.
Thank you, Judge. Okay, I'm going to move on to Commonwealth v. Lee, and I think from our perspective as staff, that what I said in terms of Act 44 is nothing necessarily for the commission to do. I think there's going to be something for the commission to do relative to Commonwealth v. Lee, and I'll explain what I mean by that and what we've discussed internally here as staff and with others. If you look at the 8th edition sentencing guidelines and the matrix, and more specifically, you would see at the top of the matrix, the commission has offense gravity scores for murder 1 and murder 2. Okay. And so what I want to do is just start with a little bit of background to say, why do we have those? And how does Lee interact with the fact that the commission has these? If we go back to prior to 2020, and that would have been Amendment 5 to the 7th edition guidelines, the commission did not have offense gravity scores specifically assigned for murder 1 or murder 2 when the offender was an adult. Okay, so there was obviously the juvenile murder 1s and 2s, which were assigned offense gravity score of 15 in the prior 7th edition sentencing guidelines. One of the things, and you heard Matt and Brett and others talk about the collection of information, it was always voluntary for counties to submit sentences for murder 1 and murder 2 to us. And so as a result of that, we just didn't have ample information. We didn't have full information when it came to murder 1 or murder 2. And for those counties that were voluntarily submitting it, because it didn't have an offense gravity score, and this is over, I'm getting a little technical, but I'll bail on it in a minute. Just because it didn't have an offense gravity score, it would interact awkwardly with the prior record score. And so what you would see is someone might have a murder 2 and a robbery charge as an example. And on their robbery charge, they would be a repeat violent offender. And on the murder 2 charge, they would be a repeat felon. And it's because in order for that revoc status and prior record score, you had to have an offense gravity score of 9 or higher. But we didn't have offense gravity scores for murder 1 or murder 2. And so it wouldn't trigger, lack of a better phrase at the moment, but it wouldn't trigger that interaction. And so in collecting that information, it was great that we received it. Obviously, we know what the sentence was going to be for murder 1 or 2 primarily, right? But we were getting incorrect information on the prior record score side. So with the 5th edition the 5th Amendment of the 7th edition, it was decided to assign offense gravity score of 15 for murder 1 and murder 2 when the defendant was an adult. And it was about collecting information. All right, it's a data collection decision. And that's been in place. And so we carried that over into the 8th edition. You have specific offense gravity scores for murder 1 and murder 2. And if you look at the recommendation, as it looks like on the matrix, it's a reflection of what the statute was. Murder 2, life without parole. It was not the commission recommending that. It's the commission stating this is the sentence. For murder 1, death or life. Commission's not recommending either one of those, just regurgitating what the statute said. So visually it looks like a recommendation, but in reality, it was a mechanism for us to collect information. So we get to Lee. Well, Lee is taken for murder two, as we all know, life without the possibility of parole off the table as the sole sanction, which will introduce discretion to the court. And so that's where the commission will, as we see it, in the future, have to have sentencing guidelines around murder two, because the commission promulgates guidelines where there's discretion to the court. And because the commission currently has murder two in the guidelines with an offense gravity score, if nothing's done in terms of the guidelines, it will look like in the future the commission is recommending life without parole for all murder two offenses. So I give you that as sort of the landscape of where, from a staff perspective, where we see the commission currently. In terms of, is there, again, from our perspective, is there anything we need to be doing, the commission needs to be doing at this time? Well, as I think we're all quite aware, we're still within the 120-day stay of the decision. I know that there has been some legislation introduced to make recommendations in terms of what a sentencing framework would look like for murder two. And at this point, what we would at least suggest to the commission is that we just wait and see what happens, right? We wait at least until the 120 days are over. We wait to see if the General Assembly does anything. We wait to see where this, goes moving forward. And I'll end with this to give you a little bit extra, is that when this similar situation happened for juveniles, right, the commission was presented with a very similar situation in which there were, offense or the need to have guidelines around discretion. And the commission waited to get its direction from the General Assembly and then amended the guidelines to reflect what the General Assembly had put into place in terms of mandatories for juveniles who had committed, murder one or two. And so if we look to the past as an example of what might the commission do or what the General Assembly might do, I think that's a smart starting point for us but we wanted to place this on the table and say we're aware of it as anybody else would be. And in this unique instance within the guidelines, when a decision that once was made to collect better information now has presented what we believe will be an opportunity or a need for the commission to either amend or revise the guidelines in the future. Okay. And I'll end on that to say, if and when the commission gets to that point, which is sort of in opposite of what we were trying to do with the 8th edition, was like limit the amendments to the guidelines. All right. And I see the senator's hands raised, and I will turn to you in just a moment, Senator. There may be an opportunity for the commission to address other things that staff have been tracking since the effective date of the 8th edition. The General Assembly's enacted many new offenses. We can review the offense gravity scores for those. We can clean up areas in terms of typos or, clarification. So, this could be an opportunity that will be a much longer discussion for us in future meetings, but we at least wanted to take this time to place it on the table. Senator?
Yes. One of the things I wanted to point out is, so Senator Cameron Bartolotta and I have offered Senate Bill 387, which would then create parole eligibility after 25 years of after an adult has received 25 years, a felony degree murder sentence, and has served 25 years in jail. And it says it's staggering. It has lower thresholds in terms of years served before parole eligibility for folks who are sentenced as juveniles, as sort of consistent with the way the court has wanted juveniles to be treated differently in other standards. Should that be adopted, the review of these the review is likely to be done not as a resentencing matter, but as a parole board. Of those cases will then be coming before the parole board, and the parole board will probably need some semblance of guidelines as to which people should actually be granted parole or not granted parole. So as we begin to think about what the approach would be, just want us to be cognizant that this approach would create parole eligibility for, I think, 1,500 people almost immediately, and then as other people, as time goes on, other people who would then have to come before the parole board. And it does not mean that those people are automatically paroled, obviously. They would then have to, the parole board would have to review those cases. So it might be helpful to begin to think about what the guidelines would be for the parole board around who's actually granted parole and who's not granted parole. It's a little different than having every case go before a judge and being resentenced.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary Harry?
And just quickly for context, we're tracking around approximately 1,160 individuals who fall in this bucket. The juvenile lifer numbers were around 500. So it's a little more than doubled what we were dealing with before. Certainly impacts with programming. And of course, if they go the parole route, that's a different scenario, but just for numbers purposes. Thank you.
Well, thank you
Madam
both.
Secretary. Thank you for the numbers.
I think with the comments from the Senator and Secretary Harry, it supports what we were thinking from a staff perspective. Is it's really prudent for us to sit here and see what happens in the landscape of murder two, in terms of what the General Assembly may or may not do. How is this handled in terms of future sentencing? And as we know, the Lee decision didn't discuss retroactivity. I'm sure we could all think about what that's going to look like. So what happens, as the Senator talked about, in terms of those who are currently serving that. So I will keep you informed of what we know, and I'm sure you will keep us informed as what you're hearing. And so thank you again, Senator, for those comments.
So just one other thing, to be clear, that as we've been discussing this, at least in the Senate, the bill would have, we're not using the word retroactivity, but it would apply to it would create parole eligibility for those currently incarcerated under murder two as well. So it would apply to both future sentences and people who are currently serving life without parole. It will create parole eligibility for all those folks.
Thank you, Senator. Just one quick thing too, I wanted to pin, and maybe this will also be part of that hour-long follow-up discussion. I think the thing that I am thinking about again are these two tracks of, we were given a certain amount of time to develop a legislative solution, but if that does not happen, then this gets kicked to the courts, and I'm very curious about how our courts feel about that. And so I think that's another thing that might be part of this discussion around the dialogue between some of these legislative solutions and the possibilities around, if this does lay in the lap of the local courts around resentencing, what does that mean?
The final piece of information that you see on the slide, just updating members. I think when we were here in March, we had talked about some of the recent legislation. It was, people were referring to it as the Shiflet fix, in terms of not being able to use ARDs as priors for DUIs. There's been a lot of discussion around those modifications to the statute. And at the time, staff, we were attempting to be really responsive in updating SGS Web so that practitioners, the DA's office and the courts could be selecting that information and submitting sentences, generating guidelines and submitting sentences. In our early reviews and discussions with other individuals, we found that I think we went further than what the actual statute needed to go, or I'm sorry, further than what the statute said in SGS Web. We have, just as an update, we shut all those offenses off in SGS Web momentarily to review at the end of this week and then pick them back up next week. In short, I guess we only really need an ungraded misdemeanor and a misdemeanor one in very few instances. But as many people were discussing as this Shiflet fix, I don't think that encompasses exactly what happened. And so just to be aware, we're working on those updates. And at the end of the day, I will say that the DUI statute is driven by the mandatories, and the guidelines really have no impact on that in terms of making recommendations that are much higher. Is really just so people could be submitting, and we'll get that fixed. So with that being said, I will, do you want to take over, Matt, or do you want me to keep on going? Yeah, I'm tired of talking. Go ahead.
All right. So just an announcement, and then we're close to adjourning here. And As you know, the Commission on Sentencing has a strong relationship with our national affiliate, which is the National Association of Sentencing Commissions. The annual conference is coming up in August 12th through the 14th in Albuquerque. Some staff will be attending, and we encourage any members who are interested in attending as well to reach out to me or Ryan, and we could provide some information. So I'm thankful to have served as vice president of that group for 6 years, and I'm term limiting out off the board, and it's been fun working with them and helping them set their agenda for the different meetings. So this will be my final meeting as VP, and happy to focus more on other things for a little bit. So again, reach out to me or Ryan regarding that. I think it's a valuable experience to hear what other states are up to see and hear from other commissions, but there are legislative members who speak, some academics who speak, solely focused on sentencing. So it's a great group for us to work with. As you know, there are roughly 20 to 25 states with sentencing commissions. There are states who come, representatives from states who don't have commissions, but are thinking about consistency and fairness in sentencing practices. In fact, there'll be a panel about states who what are called ghost commissions, who used to have commissions, like Michigan, and no longer have commissions, and understand why, and why they're trying to reestablish a commission and what capacity that commission and guidelines will play. So, so enough about that. But again, if you're interested, any member, please reach out to me or Ryan, and we could provide you with the details and help with any arrangements for travel and registering if you're interested. So the final announcement is just that our next meeting will be September 17th. And following tradition, the third commission meeting of the year will be held in State College, and we'll be working with you on getting arrangements for those who'd like to travel. We will have a dinner meeting for dinner gathering in State College for that one meeting. More details to follow on that. So I'll open it up to any final questions or comments and then turn it to the chair for adjourning this meeting.
Seeing no comments, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by DA Bible, seconded by Attorney Bakovic. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Safe travels.
Thank you. Great meeting. Thanks, everyone.